Introducing Free Indeed, a podcast for Kingdom women. Join us for conversations about the practical issues Kingdom women encounter in our varied walks of life. We'll cover topics from girlhood to grandmotherhood, from bearing fruit to bearing burdens, from domestic bliss to domestic violence, from women of old to women of tomorrow, all in the light of God's Word. And welcome to episode 1 of the Kingdom Women podcast. We would like to, in this episode, introduce you to ourselves and to what we're about. So how this whole thing got started is, none of us know each other real well. Few of us know each other in several different contexts, but the common factor that we all have is that we're all in a group together, and in that group, a Facebook group, and in that group, a suggestion was thrown out that Rosanna grabbed and acted on and reeled us all in. And so even though we don't know each other real well, we all do have a mutual respect for each other and a mutual honor for each other. And we have this common vision that's culminated in this podcast. So Rosanna, why don't you tell us a little bit about why the idea of a podcast grabbed you and what you envision for the podcast?
Well, I wasn't really thinking we'd do a podcast because I'm not at all familiar with that. But I did think it would be interesting to do a Facebook Live or something like that once or twice. But yeah, this thing got started and really interested me. And several people jumped on it. It's basically the 6 of us. We'll probably have guest speakers at some point, but it's really interesting. I've really gotten to know a lot of people, know you guys discussing this. So, and you're all a really fun bunch.
Rebecca, you were one of the early ones to jump onto the idea. What appealed to you, and what do you envision this podcast doing?
Actually, I think Rosanna added me in later. I was like, okay, let them, get on with their podcast idea. And then I didn't even comment on that thread. Rosanna just assumed that I would be a part of it.
Blame it on me.
Well, I guess I've been on some other podcasts and I like podcasting. And I think there's a huge need for women's voices. Because currently most of the Kingdom podcasts are all, the fellows and their beards and lankies and whatnot. And it's not like podcast is like, dispensing authority. It's just a chat. And that's what I'm trying to tell people. It's just women getting together to talk about these things. And we don't often get to hear that quite enough. And there has to be a good way, and I think a podcast is a good way to get women talking about women's theology and women's issues, and also going a little bit deeper than what we see online nowadays, and what's popular in terms of women's ministries or women's teaching and stuff maybe lacks some of the I feel like you guys anyway bring a lot of experience and nuance and depth to the topics that we're going to talk about, so that we get a little bit more range, a little bit more maturity, and so forth.
That's good. Well, I was mistaken. I was thinking you were one of the earlier ones, but you're saying that Rosanna kind of hauled you in after the rest of us volunteered ourselves, eh?
Yeah.
I for that, but yeah, I like the idea of like a coffee table discussion. This is how
I had thought Rebecca hauled me in.
Say that again, Abby.
I thought Rebecca had hauled me in to this.
I think she
really
did.
Yeah.
So Rosanna reeled me in. She reeled who else? Gwen, Sarah, did Rebecca haul y'all in too?
I replied to the post. I forget who posted, but I had told Joel, hey, they're talking about doing some kind of a podcast, and he goes, you're doing that, whether you want to or not. And I'm like, I do want to, but he knows me better than I know myself, I guess.
Sarah was the first person to message me about it.
Awesome. And she's such a good submissive wife that she listened to her husband and
Exactly.
responded.
Yeah.
Yeah, people should know that. People should know that you're doing this out of obedience. That will give us a stamp of.
Yeah, that'll give us the credibility, right? Yeah. Okay. Oh, that's good. Gwen, how about you? Why do you see, or what need do you see that this podcast will fill, or what do you envision? What impact do you envision it having?
Well, maybe I'll begin a little on how I got in here, because Rosanna and I had been actively communicating about writing a novel together, and that was looking really big and scary. And when she said, when she proposed something like an online discussion or something of this nature, I really liked the idea of being able to just spontaneously share with other sisters, have these conversations. And the novel may be coming. I hope so. But for now, I have been praying. I've been praying a lot about a way to share with younger women what I wish somebody had shared with me. And I see this as a possible opportunity for that. I was actively praying that God would be able to do something, I could do something. So where I am. That's why I'm here.
Good stuff. Abby, how about you? You're a pretty active member in
Well,
the group that we're all a part of, the Dank Kingdom Christian Memes group. What
maybe too active.
what was that?
I said maybe too active. I don't know.
No.
But no, I was just thinking about, I just think it would be a beautiful thing if this is a way of connecting with other women. And I had the thought occur to me, I think one of the tools of the enemy is that he likes to whisper in our ear, you're the only one, or no one else is going through this, or no one else has to deal with these questions, or whatever. And so if we can address some topics or speak to some questions or just connect in some way with someone out there, I think that'll be a beautiful thing. From my background, we did things differently than a lot of the people we fellowship with for a very long time. And so that really resonates with me, to knowing what that feels like if you're kind of out there on your own, or maybe you have a church that's not real big. And so, yeah, I'm just hoping this will be a means of connection it already has been wonderfully connecting for all of us. I've really enjoyed getting to know everybody. But if someone out there listens and feels a little bit less alone, or realizes, hey, someone else is going through what I'm going through, I think that'll be beautiful.
Yeah, that's good.
Apparently, I'm supposed to be the devil's advocate and counterbalance all the wild ladies here.
The devil's advocate to the wild ladies. Wait a minute. Sounds like you should be the angel among us, apparently. I actually think, Abby, that you might provide some balance to the rest of us. Seem pretty intense, I think. And you're a little more low key, so I think you add some good balance in that aspect to the rest of us, maybe.
So, yeah, we'll see. I think as we get into some of your stories and your experiences, some of you ladies have been through some pretty intense things, and we all have our own, I don't know if baggage is the right word, but we all have our own goggles that we wear. We view things through our own experiences, and my experience is different from everyone else's experience. So, yeah, we'll see.
Yeah, what I look forward to is the discussions. Like what I often encounter in talking with other women is that we're really concerned about getting it right and doing it right, and we're scared of of getting it wrong. And I think already in just discussions we've had as a team, preparing for this podcast, you know, we've had some pretty intense discussions, and we've just disagreed with each other, we've dissented with each other, we've debated a bit, and we don't all come out exactly the same place, but we all are seeking Jesus, and we're all willing to dive in and wrestle with some of this stuff. And I think that as a younger woman, I would have really benefited from hearing women discuss things, discuss the issues that we've been discussing and what we're going to discuss on future episodes. So I'm excited about that. Really excited about it.
That's something that I have really appreciated too with all of you. Even though, Judy, I knew you in real life or offline or whatever, but everyone else I just know online. But I feel like we have this vibe going on between us to where we can just say what we think, you know, and we're not going to be offended or whatever. Hopefully, I hope that's the case. But yeah, I think we can all just be really blunt with each other, and that's working for us, and no one's stomped off in tears at it. So yeah, and I think at our core, at our center, we're very aligned in wanting to follow Jesus. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I know our conversations as we're working on this have just been so enlightening to me, because I think we're all going to grow because we actually are discussing some pretty tough issues. And if we don't learn, you know, we will learn, because I notice we don't argue too much. You know, we ask questions, we get deep, if you're not sure if you agree, you say so, and then we all discuss the relevant factors that lead into it. So I think that's pretty good. We've got to come around.
I feel like I've learned a lot. I've learned a lot already.
Same. And I'm looking forward to, like you said, Abby, hearing more of y'all's stories and what shaped your thinking, what shaped your approach to this, you know, what we call kingdom living. I'm looking forward to that. So, have any of you, just out of curiosity, have any of you imagined being part of a podcast before?
Never.
I'm too old for that.
Nah.
I disagree.
Rebecca has been on one.
Yeah.
Rebecca has been on one.
Oh, yeah.
I've been on the That Jesus podcast, so shout out to that, and the Dang
It's
Kingdom.
really good.
Shout out to that too. We love our fellas.
Can we link to that podcast that you were on?
Yeah,
with
sure.
Titus,
We can
Rebecca?
put it down below. Yeah, and the Dang
That was really
Kingdom
good.
one. I
Yeah.
think part of the reason why our discussions are kind of like at the mature level and not like at the fist slamming on the table levels, because we already come from a community where we have these discussions.
Yes.
Which is the meme group, so we're kind of like, you know, we're all homies there, and
Well,
and
hopefully,
well, kind of.
hopefully we've learned to argue elsewhere, but also to argue nicely. You know, one of the things I learned is we had to fight nice, but actually not disagreeing really doesn't grow us at all. So
I think that's a healthy place, but it's a very controversial place. I don't think it's for everyone, but it's a healthy place to talk about disagreement. It's just that we don't talk about ladies' issues all that often there.
Mm-hmm.
that's good.
And like I mentioned the other day when we were talking, when you're willing to argue with somebody, that actually shows respect for the other person. Because how often do you bother to argue with somebody who doesn't matter to you?
Right.
And arguing has gotten a really bad rap. It's been equated with fighting or something like that, and that's not what it means. It means to argue is to present my case so somebody else can look at it and understand it, and then to listen to the other person present their case. And we don't honor each other if we just won't engage about the things that might be controversial. We don't grow.
And
That's fine.
we don't even understand our own point of view. If we can't look at someone else's point of view and understand where they're coming from and know why that isn't our point of view, or if we're too scared of maybe possibly changing our point of view, we don't know why we stand for anything. And then we really stand for nothing. We just kind of have a list of things maybe we think we believe, but we don't defend them if we aren't willing to engage other people with them.
Well, I was just thinking, I've actually heard people talk as if they think there's something noble about not getting in a discussion, or they'll say, I can't talk as well as you can. And I continue to wonder, do I really believe it if I can't explain it? Anyway, I know some of us can articulate better than others, but I think we ought to be able to say why we think what we do, or else just admit it's a feeling I have and I don't really have a good reason. There's nothing wrong with saying that.
Well, I think there are folks who believe something pretty strongly but aren't able to articulate it well. I think it's concerning when we put our security in what we believe, to the point that we can't listen, like Sarah was saying, listen to another point of view. We're too afraid. And I know, like, I remember something that I faced when I was in my late 30s, and it kind of, if I was gonna look at this issue and change my view on it, it almost felt like the whole 30 plus years before this was based on what? And it kind of shook me to my core, and I needed shook to the core, and I was shook to the core, and I changed my view, and it was so good. And it doesn't mean the previous 30 plus years were wasted in coming at something from an unhealthy angle. But that was my fear, because my identity was tied into that belief instead of tied into who Jesus is. And the more firmly I've got tied into that, the more open I am to looking at everything with a more open stance. Because if he's truth, he's going to guide me into all truth. And I can trust him with that, his Holy Spirit with that.
That's the thing, people have a stereotype about women or people who look conservative, that they assume that we're fundamentalists as well, that we're kind of like, it must be this way, there's no other way, there's no nuance, it's just, you have to follow these very general principles and abide by them, life or death kind of thing. And there are principles that you hold by life or death, but there are some things that you kind of need a little bit more like discussion, more depth to it than what's currently out there at the moment, I feel. It kind of reminds me that like in the early church, or in the history of the radical reformation for you guys, women kind of had to stand up for what they believed in a lot more than today. So they had to, be in the Colosseum, and they had to profess what they believe and stuff, or they had to go before the Zurich Council, and they would actually use those opportunities, like their execution, their trials, to actually really speak out, until they were banned from speaking at their own executions because they were having such an impact on crowds.
Wow, that really goes against the women keeping silent, principle that some of us hear about. But it's true, like, we've come a long way from the beginnings of our faith, Christianity, and women professing or discussing what they believe. So I really like that thought, Rebecca.
Mm-hmm.
And that I want to clarify that I don't think we should be able to point 1, point 2, point 3. This is what I believe and why I believe it. That I think I meant more that we can engage about it, that we aren't threatened by somebody asking us why.
Mm-hmm.
It reminds me, Gwen, of in teaching, like homeschooling or whatever, if you can get a student to teach it back to you, then that's when you can know that they've had mastery of that subject. If you can articulate something back and teach someone else, then you've actually internalized it and you've understood it to like a higher level than just listening to it or whatever.
There's no real virtue in being able to parrot something if it isn't yours, if you can't defend it, if you can't take it and dig through it, and if you're not willing to challenge it even in your own mind, it's not yours, and you might as well be a baby. You're not, there's no maturity there to your belief. There's no teeth to it. And that's something we should, we start as babies, so to speak. We don't have the maturity in our beliefs, but as we grow and as we learn to defend them, and as we learn to really understand what Christ is teaching us, it's going to continue to evolve and change. And sometimes it's scary, but we should never be afraid to learn more or afraid to see something a different way.
And if we are who we are just because we're around a certain group of people, but if we would be taken away from that group of people and put into a different group of people that makes us change, then we probably didn't really believe what we said we believed in the first place. If it's not part of who we are, I feel like I see that frequently happen. But
Can we each
What
discuss some of the topics that we're pretty passionate about? I don't know, like I myself, I talk, or I get excited more when we talk about women's issues in the church, or like domestic violence, physical abuse, or some of the issues that women in conservative Christian circles really don't know how to address. That's been one of my passions, because I've been in the place where I needed questions answered. So, and I didn't have anyone who could answer them. So that it came, I found people and I got help. But that's one thing that I see as wanting to get out there for young women who have the same questions, so that we can answer questions for them, or at least give somebody an idea of where to go.
Mhm.
How about the rest of you? What are some issues that you're passionate about that you hope we can address or discuss on this podcast?
I might say, back to what Sarah said when she was talking about examining things and not being afraid of it. That's that kind of brings in the theme of our podcast, that you shall know the truth, and the truth will set you free. There is no freedom, no beauty in just wow. So it's knowing the truth, and in order to know the truth, you have to be willing to be challenged to believe.
Yes.
Being very sure I had the truth about something caused a lot of destruction in my life. But on the other hand, I don't remember that anybody was credibly speaking the other thing to me. And so I'm going to read a little piece of a prayer that I have written a couple of weeks ago. I said, in my ignorance, I allowed destruction. I grieve this, but I know you forgive. And so I forgive myself for not doing what I didn't know to do. Please show me a way and enable me to teach other women to do what I didn't know to do, how to be redemptive and strong in their love, how to protect their children and truly help their husbands. Please show me how you would have your daughter walk, that's my personal prayer, in ways that are kind, merciful, and humble, but strong, courageous, and redemptive. Teach me your paths and give me grace for walking them. And that's what I want for all the sisters that are listening.
That's beautiful. I think we could all say amen to that prayer. Yeah.
Talking about learning to defend ourselves, I know for me, I come from completely non-Christian backgrounds. I was raised about an hour from San Francisco. My parents are, I guess you'd call them agnostics, and I have pretty well always kind of been on the edges of wherever I am. And for me, that's not, I mean, it has been great for my development in some senses, but I think God's design for the church is that it's active, practical, hands-on community. And I'd love to see women get together, whether we're over the internet, whether we're in person or on some kind of a discussion board. We need that. We need to be able to talk to each other, and really we need to be able to do life together. That's kind of our family's motto. And I'd love to see discussion on how that can happen, because church is so much more than teaching and being discipled. I mean, that's incredibly important, but it's doing life together. It's Jesus in all of us together. I think it was Menno Simons that says, no man is in Christ without his brother. And I think that's just as true for us women.
True.
And you kind of need both. You can't have one half of the church being more active and vocal, though they have to be, but you can't just like be passive either, because you can't go to God without your brother, but you can't go in a church full of just brothers or just sisters, I don't think.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think it's an issue, but just a general concept for me that a lot of the stuff that's out there is about what thou shalt not do, or it doesn't really tell women what to do a lot of the time, and it doesn't provide for spiritual growth and like to be tested and stretched, because it's just telling you to just, you know, stay in a maybe a kind of like a flat stereotypical view of what being a woman according to the Bible is. But you know, at the end of the day, Jesus is not going to say, well done, you know, good and faithful servant, you didn't do this, or you didn't question the status quo, so now you may enter eternal rest because you were very passive and did what you were told.
I like that. I really like that. I never really thought of it that way. That's pretty good.
Good thoughts, Rebecca.
Abby, how about you? What topics or what issues are close to your heart?
So I don't know that the things that make me tick, I don't know that they're going to appeal to a wide range of women. I'd love to get into the doctrinal discussions, and the head covering in particular is close to my heart, because that's something that started us on a journey to where we're at now. And then non-resistance, non-participation. When I read those old Anabaptist stories and get into the history, this makes my heart burn within me. And that's the kind of stuff I am passionate about. And so I love Rebecca and all her knowledge and all the facts and history stuff that she can throw out. So we'll just have to see if we get into that. But I do feel like we had some questions come in about, I forget how it was worded, but how is it to come into a conservative culture from not growing up in that or whatever? And so, yeah, maybe we can discuss that at times. I feel like we've been very blessed with a church that made it easy for us to do that. And I know that's not been everyone's experience. But yeah, and it's not always been a smooth. We've had a few bumps along the way too, because of the culture stuff. But yeah, so maybe we'll get into that at some point.
Well, I don't think we'll run out of topics anytime soon. And I love the diversity of our group. We are such a diverse lot in age and life experiences, in backgrounds. And for you listeners, if you want to learn a little more about who we are individually, you can go to our Facebook page, which will be linked, I'm guessing, below as well. And you can learn a little bit more of our backstories of each of us individually. But we're quite diverse. Some of us from plain, Anabaptist type backgrounds, some not. From across the country and even out of the country. So we've got a diverse group here with diverse interests, diverse but converging interests and passions. So I don't think we're running out of topics anytime soon. The podcast, just to let you know, the podcast will be released every 2 weeks, initially here at least. And we're planning our first series to kind of center around identity, what it means to be a Christian, a kingdom woman, we're gonna ask questions. We're gonna discuss questions. I don't know that we'll get them all answered, really, but we're gonna discuss questions like, what in the world is a virtuous woman? How many verses does she need anyway? How quiet is quiet enough? And other questions centered around identity as women and women of God. So I'm looking forward to some. I mean, already the discussions we've had have been quite stimulating. You saw a little bit of it in our preview that we released on our Facebook page, and those discussions, I'm really looking forward to them. So let's wrap up with a little bit of fun here. Let's wrap up with some trivia about our cast. I'm guessing some of you folks watching are maybe curious about how old we are. We do have like a 33-year range in our ages. Kind of fun. So shall we start with the oldest? Gwen, how old are you?
I am 58 years old.
Gwen is
I'll be 59 in August.
Okay. I'm 48. I think I'm the next in age. Rosanna, are you next? What's your age?
I'm 46. I'll be 47 in December, so.
Okay. And Abby?
44, 45 in August.
And Sarah is?
32.
32. And Sarah may have to leave us temporarily. She has a little munchkin coming in 2 months. And but she's going to hang with us as long as she can before maybe that takes precedence. Maybe it'll be a really good baby, Sarah, and you'll be able to just, join us. Anyway.
We'll like to see cute babies on the show.
For real.
Exactly.
And Rebecca is, she's the baby among us. How old are you, Rebecca?
I'm 25 going on 26.
Oh, what's that? 16 going on 17? Is that you?
Something like that. But when I registered for Facebook, I put my age as, I put that I was born in 1964. So according to Facebook, I'm 55. So I'm older than...
You're older than all of us.
She keeps trying to insist that she was born in 68. And I'm like, no way. Not happening.
We should also tell people that even though she's the youngest, I think she's far and away the most educated.
no.
Yeah.
Rebecca is our educated intellectual, and I love it.
Yeah.
She's like a walking encyclopedia of history of all kinds.
Yeah.
And how many languages
That's
do you
awesome.
Well, it's mainly English, but I know a little bit of 2 more. And yeah, in terms of conversation.
Gotcha.
And Greek and Hebrew and all that good stuff.
Right. She can parse out that stuff real well. So we're thankful for that. And we've got Gwen with her years of experience and wisdom, and us in the middle who are, us 4 in the middle between those 2 ages that, we all bring good stuff, life experiences, wisdom from what God has taught us through our experiences. So, okay, well, I think that's a wrap. You can tune in 2 weeks for our next episode of the Kingdom Women podcast.
Thank you
Bye-bye.
for coming. Bye.
Bye.